What's up, guys? Bringing you another tutorial today, and hopefully my mic won't freak out this time. So, anyways, what we're going to be doing is creating this sort of thing right here, this little targeting reticle. If you guys don't play Halo, this is what it looks like without it. So we're going to create, well, here, let me go into the comp. We're going to create this, and as you can see here, let me fit the comp. It's going to be scaling in, and it's going to move a little bit, so we've animated it a little bit. And so I'm going to be teaching you guys a little bit about shape layers, and this tutorial was by request, and it's going to be aimed at someone who's literally never opened After Effects before, ever. So it should be pretty useful for those of you who are total beginners. So let's jump into it. So the first thing you do, let me close everything. So you just opened up After Effects and you're here. So the first thing you want to do is create a new composition. I'm going to work in 720p. That's your width and your height. Halo, most video games run at 720p right now, and frame rate is 30 frames per second for most things. Sometimes 29.7, but you know, if you're going to be working with footage, you want to match the frame rate to the footage. So I capture in 30 frames per second, so I'm going to use 30 frames per second here as well. So 1280, 720, 30 frames per second, and just because we're going to use a duration of 5 seconds here, just to get started. Because the first thing we're going to do is create these shape layers. So now we've got our comp, and within basically, you know, if you work in Vegas or something like that, a composition is, I mean, it's almost like a layer track or a track layer in Vegas. But basically, it's just a place where you do stuff. So, you know, you got a solid, or you can import a file and bring the file in. There's your file. You know, this right here is your timeline. You can scrub through it. Yeah, so that's the composition. Pretty simple. I'm going to avoid too much detail about After Effects because I think the interface is pretty self-explanatory. That's your timeline. That's your menu. That's effects and presets. You can search for effects. There's your character where you can adjust the everything else. You can go to smoother. I don't know what Paint does actually. It's a new feature for CS6. But anyways, there's just other window boxes around here. So yeah, let's kind of skip past some of that. And also, if it doesn't let you create things, you need to click on the comp. So like you can see, if I click out of it, I can't create a new layer or add an effect. You see how I have this selected? It's in yellow. Click back in, so then I can create what I want. So we're going to be working with shape layers. So I'm going to go Layer, New, Shape Layer, and nothing shows up, which is the way it's supposed to work. And also, I should say, this is the scaling, so we can go into 200%. You can't see anything right now, but you get the idea. I like to stay at 100% usually, especially if I'm working with small things. But it's also useful to just go fit, because then you can, you know, really get an idea of what you're working with. Anyways, so we're going to go into our shape layer, and right now there's nothing. That's because we've added nothing. So you're going to click this little add button, and since we're going to be creating that arrow thing, I'm going to create that arrow using a polystar and a rectangle. Okay? So, and actually, before I go any further, let's add a group. There we go. And you're going to select both of these and move them into the group. That'll be useful for us later. So for the polystar, right now it's a star. That's fine. Why did you just do that to me? There we go. Sorry. I clicked away from the layer, and that's why those disappeared. So I'm going to change the points to 3, which, unsurprisingly, gives me a triangle. I guess you can't go any lower than 3 with this, actually, but you can go higher. So, but we're going to stick with 3. And I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. Oops. Negative 90 degrees. So we get an arrow. And that's pretty much all I'm going to need to do with that. Well, actually, yeah, because I'm going to want it to be smaller than this, because I'm going to want it to scale. I'm going to want the whole effect to scale in, and if my arrow is half the size of my damn composition, then I'm not going to be able to do much of a scaling. So let's work with that a little bit. Give myself some more space. I'm actually going to set it to fit now, so you can see how this is helpful. Let's see. So inner radius, I want this to be actually 10% of where we are right now. That actually might be too small. Let's do 5% or 20%. So I'm going to do 10 and 20 for the inner radius and the outer radius, and that gets us that nice little triangle. Now we're going to go into the rectangle. You're going to uncheck this little constrained proportions thing, because we don't need that. And you're going to go ahead and scale it right down. I'm going to zoom back in a little bit, maybe 200. I guess I'm going 400. That's fine. Let's move it around. There we go. So now you can see we've got this arrow, but you know, it's just these lines at this point. And if you click this little button, that's toggle the mask and shape path visibility, you can see that there's actually nothing there. So we're going to add a fill. And we obviously don't want red because that's butt ugly. We're going to want white. Or I want white. You can do whatever you want. I don't care. So, this is actually, that's looking good. I don't think I need it to be bigger than that. So there's our first arrow. Pretty simple. So now we're going to do one more thing. We're going to go down to transform group 1. And you're going to grab the anchor point and you're going to push it out away. So now you need to imagine if you want the center of this person's or your target's head to be right where that little dot is, then of course it doesn't make any sense for the arrow to be right next to it. I mean, I guess if you wanted that, that'd be fine. But if we just do it here with the anchor point movement, then I don't have to, I don't have to play with any sort of like movements or anything like that. And it's going to make things very simple. So now this will show you. So you're going to click, and this is why it'll make things very simple if we do the anchor point adjustment. So you're going to click on group 1, duplicate it 4 times, go into the first one, transform. You're going to transform the rotation 90 degrees. So since we move the anchor point and it rotates around the anchor point, we get this nice rotation and it's perfect. It's the same distance away from the center and it's 90 degrees. We're going to do the same thing for group 3, except use 180 degrees. There we go. Same thing for group 4. I'm going to use, there it is, plus 180 plus 90 is 270, so 270 degrees. So there we have our nice arrows. Pretty simple, really, to set that up. So that's basically all we need for that layer now. So now let's go and let's make another shape. Oops, sorry, I don't want to adjust the layer. Let's make another new shape layer. Actually, I'm going to pause the video real quick. All right, sorry about that. So where were we? We just created another shape layer. So let's actually, for this time, we're going to add an ellipse. And we're going to add a stroke. So in case you haven't figured out, a fill fills your shapes, whereas a stroke strokes your shapes. Yeah, who'd have thought? Anyways, so I'm going to leave this checked, and I'm just going to scale this up because I kind of want it to go right through the arrows, just like that. And then I'm going to go into the stroke. I'm going to set the stroke with maybe 5. Yeah, I want it to look pretty thin. Okay. And then within the stroke, we're going to add dashes. And actually, I like, you're not supposed to use the default for anything, but I actually like the default at 10. I think it looks pretty cool. So now we get that nice dash line, and it looks nice. And I think it'll look better if I put it below. That probably makes literally no difference, but yeah. Okay. So now we've got our nice element. It's easy, right? So I think what I want to do next is I want to track it before I animate it. Or we can do some base animations right now. So I covered expressions a little bit in another video, probably something about wiggle expressions is in the title, but let's solo this so we can see what we're working with. We've got these arrows, and we want to just, I mean, it's totally static right now, as you can see, and that's kind of lame. So we want to edit this, and I'm going to Alt-click on the scale, so hold down Alt and click on that, and we're going to write an expression. I'm not going to go heavily into expressions here because I've covered them in my own videos, and there are way smarter people than me who have covered them, but basically what you're going to do is write time star, and for this one I think I'm going to use, I don't want it to move very much. I'm going to use time star 5. What did you just say to me, After Effects? The fuck? Oh, that was stupid. Okay. Sorry. We're going to use this time expression on the rotation, not the scale. Sorry about that. And that's why it gave me an error. You can't multiply the scale times time. That's weird. So there we go. So now you can see it's just real slowly rotating. I'm actually going to use time times 10. That's looking a little slow. If you ever want to see your work in real time, you can go Composition, Preview, RAM Preview. Or for those of you with a numpad, numpad 0. I'm not special, so I don't have a numpad, because I work on a laptop. But anyway, so you can see slowly rotating. That's just a nice way, because otherwise you'd have to animate it. You know, you'd have to click on rotation and add a keyframe at 0, then go all the way out to here and add a keyframe at like whatever. And then if you wanted to add more to your comp, you'd have to move those keyframes again or add new keyframes. So having an expression for time just makes it nice and easy. I want it to go a little bit faster, so I'm going to go time times 20. And time is the expression you want to use when you just want to kind of automate the movement of certain values over time. So now for the scale, we're going to use another expression. So I had already alt-clicked on that, so I can just click on that little line. But if you don't have that, if you didn't fuck up like I did, you'll just alt-click on the stopwatch there. You can type in wiggle 1, and then I'm going to use 10. So again, I covered wiggle a little earlier in my previous tutorial actually, but essentially it's wiggles the value it's applied to, so scale. It's going to it's going to change my scale. The first number is 1, so it's going to wiggle my scale 1 times per second. I think it's per second. Yeah, but anyways, the first number is the frequency, the number of times it does something per second. And then the second number is the magnitude of that change. So if I have wiggle 110, that means it's going to randomly change the scale for a maximum of a value of 10 1 times per second. All right. So you can see that. You can see how the scale is kind of wiggling a little bit. Let's do a RAM preview again. Again, whenever you want to see something in real time, do a RAM preview. So you can see slowly rotating, slowly wiggling. We've added a little life to it. And so obviously there's tons of ways you could do this. We could add wiggle to the position, do wiggle, oops, I don't need that bracket, wiggle 1, 5, because I don't want much wiggle on the position. And now we're moving a little bit or get a little bit more life. And there's all kinds of other ways you can take this to add more life. So we've animated that layer. I like that. That's fine. So now let's do the same thing for here. Actually, I need to this little dot, that means you've soloed it. So I'm going to unsolo this. Now I'm going to solo this one. So this one, same deal. I want it to rotate in the opposite direction. I want it to rotate faster. So I'm going to go to transform. I'll click on rotation, time times -15. And now you can see it's going in the opposite direction. And then I'm going to do, so that you get the rotation. I like it. And then instead of, we could go into the scale. I guess it really doesn't matter. You can wiggle the scale, or you can go into the ellipse size and wiggle this. Let's just do this here. Why not, right? I'm going to use, I actually want it to wiggle a little bit faster, so I'm going to use 1.5 and 10. Okay, so now you can see it's kind of moving around. Actually, that looks fucking horrible. Sorry. Scrap that. we're gonna do the wiggle on the scale. And what I think the difference there is that, yeah, because like if you wiggle the ellipse path is generating these dashes, and so it's screwing with the dashes. Whereas if we just animate the overall scale of the layer, it's not going to mess with the dashes. Okay. Actually, I don't want it to wiggle that much, so I'm just going to put 5. I'm going to put 5. Okay. So now let's turn everything on, unsolo that, do a RAM preview. There we go. So now it's at the end. It's got a little life. I mean, this is totally personal, obviously. Do whatever you want. This is just what I've decided that I want to do with this thing. Just to make it a little bit better, you normally do this at the end. Actually, I don't know if this is going to make any real difference. There might not be enough movement. But I've checked these 2 boxes, which are motion blur, and when you do that, you have to enable motion blur for the whole comp with this switch. And we can do another RAM preview. And as you can see, it's taking a little bit longer because it's generating these little motion blurs whenever there's a movement that's created by After Effects. And you can't really tell any difference here because the movements are too slow. But it does make everything look a little bit better. You guys probably can't see any difference, but I can see a little bit of one. And if we had like really fast motion, I'll show you actually. Let's see. Go into the transform. I'm going to wiggle this like 5 times a second for 50. Then okay, there you go. Now you can sort of see, actually that kind of looks cool. Let's do a RAM preview with that. It's going to look like shit once it's in regular motion, but I kind of like it. So now you can see that there's definitely some motion blur, and that does look a lot better than not having motion blur. And actually, I kind of like the way that looks. It looks almost cartoony. It's cool. So, yeah. I'm going to save this. Okay, I'm not going to save this. That's stupid. Sorry. I don't need to save it. You should save it if you're using this in any of your work, but I don't need to save it. So, moving on. We've got our custom target reticle thingy that we've been wanting to make. So now let's bring in our footage. I've got a random angle for a project which some of you have likely seen this angle used in that I'm going to use. So I'm going to create a new composition of this, but I'm going to set this to 5 seconds just because that's all I want. And also because it's the same length as actually I'm going to rename this. You can press enter to rename things. Sorry, I'm jumping around a lot. Or actually, let's just call this reticule. Always good to label. So my reticule comp is 5 seconds, and if I want my reticule to last for the whole duration of the angle, then my reticule composition needs to be the same length as my transition or as my angle composition. So let's go fit. Which part of this? I'm just selecting the part of the angle that I want to use. Then thought I had more good angleness to this. Good angleness. What does that even mean? All right, so I'm going to take this down to 2 minutes and 15 frames, which is half a second, because we're at 30 frames per second, because I don't need all of what I had there. Damn. All right. So I'm just trying to get a good part of this damn angle. There. So that's good. I like that. So I have that whole part of the angle, and I'm going to what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring in my reticule. Okay? So there it is. Obviously, it's not tracking onto this guy because it's just, we haven't done any tracking yet. It wouldn't make any sense if it tracked onto the guy. So we're going to do really basic introduction to tracking, I guess. I don't have my track window up, so I'm going to go to Window and then click Tracker. brings that up. And then, so there you can see my tracking thing. First thing you want to do is always create a new null object when you do tracking. So then we're going to click on the angle, and we want to track motion. For this sort of an effect, I don't need to track the camera because I don't really care, or I don't like, it doesn't really make sense to me to have this be tracked in 3D. I just want it to stick onto the Spartan. If that makes sense. It probably doesn't, but basically just use track motion for this. If you wanted, like you can see the camera move like that. If you wanted the rotation or the scale of the reticule to follow the camera, then you'd want to do track camera. But since we just want it to follow the Spartan, we're just going to use track motion. So click track motion. It'll give you this little track point. Now all we don't need rotation or scale. Actually, no, I'm not going to make this complicated. I don't want scale. Oh, crap. I don't know why I did that to me. Yeah, so you gave me, because I guess when it didn't like uncheck scale for some reason. Rather frustrating. But, I have these two track points. I don't want them, so I'm actually just going to redo this. I'm just going to go back to my composition, click track motion again. So, sorry about that. I know that was probably confusing. But basically, we've got our one track point. We have position checked. Our motion target is the null 1. And what we're going to do is grab this and bring it up. We want it to track on the head. Now, if we're really lucky, we can just click this little play button and analyze forward. But as you can see, with my luck, with my experience with Halo footage, the tracking just never seems to work properly. Even if it's just too much movement usually with angles that we create, and it just never works the way it's supposed to. So, yeah, unfortunately, I clicked reset, by the way. Unfortunately, a lot of times what you have to do is hand track every frame. So you gotta click analyze one frame forward. Well, it's looking good. Oh shit. Now you gotta fix it manually. And in case you can't tell, this is a major pain in the ass. I have to go through and do this tracking. There are like tweaks you can do. Let's adjust my search area, I guess. It's making it a little better, make it a little easier on me. There are probably ways to set this up to make it easier on yourself, but I'm unaware of them at this point in my life. Maybe one of you can direct me towards it. As you can see, if there's not much motion, it does a fairly decent job tracking. But the problem is there, stupid fucking flag down the damn way, and so you kind of have to fudge it. And this is part of working with a console shooter for videos, for frag vids, is that you have to fake a lot of shit and you have to do it yourself. So I'm sure they completely lost it, as you can see, because over the course of one frame, the Spartan went up a lot. So we have to do that by hand. So I'm going to pause the video for you guys. I'm already at 24 minutes. You guys don't need to watch me hand track for the entire time. So I'll pause it and come back. It'll be like magic. This whole thing will be tracked. Unfortunately for you and for me, that's not how it works in real life. But anyways, I'll be right back. All right, we're back. That actually wasn't too bad for me. So as you can see, we've got the whole thing tracked. It's sticking to where we want it to the whole time, just like that. Nice and neat. Okay? And so once we've got it the way we want it, or once we've got it to look the way we want it to, you're going to click Apply, Dimensions XY. And so now you'll notice that our null is attached to the Spartan's face. Cool. So you're gonna hit P on the null and P on our reticule comp, which I dragged in. I don't know if I explicitly said that. Alt click on the position of the reticle comp, grab this pig whip, and attach it to the position. And by the way, to bring up position, I don't know if I said this, to bring up the position values on both these, I pressed P. So, yeah, that's probably useful. Oh, look at that. It's nice and tracked. And obviously we can kind of mess with the scale a little bit. I'm going to put the scale at like maybe 70%. Yeah. So let's go fit. Let's do a little RAM preview just to see how it looks.
Egg stolen.
Pretty good. Not a perfect track.
Stolen.
And if you're doing this for,
Stolen.
something a little more professional, obviously you might want to tweak that track a little bit.
Stolen.
As you can see, we've got the reticule on the guy's head, and we're looking good. So now let's do something a little bit nice. So over the course of one frame, I want this reticule to kind of scale in, almost like it's sort of finding the dude's head. So we're going to go into our reticule comp, and I want this animation to happen over the first 1 second. So we're going to start it here and go to 1 second. So frame 0 here, and then frame 30. You can see 1 0 0 frame. It's 1 second, 0 frames. So 0 to 1 second. So what I'm going to do, let's do the easiest one first. Let's go into, let's just click on this little arrow to find the contents. And what I want to do, I want to go into this ellipse path, and at 1 second, I'm going to click, just regular click on that stopwatch, and that adds a keyframe. So that tells After Effects that at that time we want the size of this ellipse path that's creating this circle to be 257 pixels. I don't know if it's measured in pixels, but 257 is the value. So now we're going to go back to the beginning of the comp, and we're going to zoom out a little bit. Fucking thing, I swear. I guess I can literally only be between 25 and 200, but anyways. So now I'm going to scale way up, right to the outside of the comp, so I can't see it anymore. And I have a keyframe there as well. And you can see that over time, we scale in. Pretty cool. Yeah. And while I'm here, I'm going to make a little adjustment. I'm going to make the stroke 7 pixels thick. Just a little preference. And so this one's going to be a little bit more complicated. But we're going to go into each group, and you're going to add a keyframe for the anchor point. Keyframe the anchor point. Keyframe the anchor point. Keyframe the anchor point. Go back to 0. Take the anchor point, drag it until this arrow is off screen. Same deal for each group. Drag it off screen. It's automatically, if you've added a keyframe once, it's going to automatically add keyframes for you every time you do a change. Same thing for group 3. Move it off screen. Same thing for group 4. Move it off screen. So now you can see everything kind of scales down. And so just to sort of add a little magic, what I want to do is I don't want it to just scale immediately down. I want it to kind of scale down, and I'm going to scale it down further than where we were before, so it gets smaller, right? So it's going to kind of scale in and then come back out. Just gives it a little bit more life, basically. Drag that. And then I'm going to do the same thing with all the, how much time do I have actually? Oh, I think I just hit my limit. I might have to cut this into two. We'll see. So, yeah, I'm going to do the same thing with these ones. I'm going to scale them in too much. At that keyframe, bring them too far into the center. Looking good. Hope YouTube lets me upload longer than 30 minutes, but I bet they don't, so I'm probably going to have to cut this into two. Oh, well, more revenue for me, no doubt. Make 1 cent instead of half a cent. Yeah, that's right. All right, so now I like that animation. Let's go back to our transition angle 2 comp, and you can see, is that going to be a problem? Yes, yes it is. Okay. There are better, you know what, okay, yeah, there is a much better way to work around this. We're gonna, what are we gonna do? We're gonna put the scale at 100%. Still causing a problem because, you know, we've animated the position of this composition, and you can see that we sort of lose the edges of our little effect here, because as we've animated the position, the limits of this composition are kind of going crazy. So, there are ways around this, definitely, but I think they're kind of beyond the scope of this tutorial, especially since I've already cut it into 2 pieces. So I think what I'm gonna do, maybe, all right, so right here is the frame where it loses everything. And I'm gonna select all these keyframes on the null. And these position keyframes were created when we did the tracking, but I'm just going to delete them. And then, so what that's going to do, and then, so right 1 keyframe before, I'm going to click on this position and reset it. And so remember that our reticule is linked to the position of that. And so now it actually looks correct, even though it's not tracked in quite like it's supposed to be. You know, you can sort of fake it. Because right there you go. See? Alright, so enough fiddle faddle. Let's do a little RAM preview. Okay. I can usually get it up to be exactly under. There we go. Beautiful. Position preview, RAM preview. Rendering nice and fast, actually.
Hey, stolen.
See?
Hey,
We got our nice little scale in. Then we get our
stolen.
tracking thingy
Hey,
following this guy. That's it.
Hey, stolen.
Really simple. I'll probably do the motion blur thing again. That might be too much motion blur. Let's find out. And so the motion blur, if we add it to both comps,
stolen.
Yeah, that actually looks
Hey,
nice. So
stolen.
now, you know, the movement
stolen.
of this reticule is actually getting some motion blur. So in that first comp, we have motion blur, and the motion blur is applied to the movements of the reticule. And then in the second comp, the movement is just applied to the movement that's created by the position moving. I don't know if that makes sense, but like, you know, the only things we've animated in this composition is the position of the whole thing. So it's like After Effects is not going to see these arrows and give them motion blur. So if I turn off motion blur for this comp, you can see the difference. It's not going to read those values. It's only going to read those animations within this comp. So if you want to have realistic motion blur for the whole thing, you need to have motion blur on for both comps. So that about wraps it up. There's tons of things that you can do with this. You could obviously add way more to this reticule using the shape layers than what I've done. We could add add a glow to this reticule. I think it looked pretty. I don't need any glow threshold. I'm going to turn the radius up and the intensity down a little bit. And you can always change this to like overlay and then duplicate it a bunch of times. That can be an interesting effect. Sort of blurry almost. Helps it blend with the comp more. You can change the layer mode to soft light, sort of the same thing. I think add, because this is a pure white comp. I guess add's a little different because we've got the glows. So yeah, and that's it's about the size of it. Probably turn down the opacity to like 80% so it blends a little better. No, let's try 90%. Yes, so that way just a little bit of blending. There's tons of ways you can take it, but I think this is about the gist of what I wanted to show. So I think that's it. 36-minute tutorial. I hope that's it. I always used to make fun of people who did ridiculously long tutorials for something simple, but here I am creating a ridiculously long tutorial for something simple. But I hope that was educational. If there's anything you don't understand, again, I know this was directed completely at beginners, and I might have brushed over something really confusing. So please feel free to ask me if there's something strange. And that's about it. Cool. Peace.